Hello everyone, so good to see you. Happy New Year. It is the dawn of the year 2025, and I personally have been thinking a lot about Metroid. Specifically, Metroid Prime. Even more specifically, the way that Metroid Prime 4 is set to release later this year. It is a game we're going to see more of, a game we're going to play, and we'll be able to say that a Metroid Prime game finally released 3 console generations later. The original Metroid Prime 3 Corruption released in 2007 on the Wii. I was still an awkward kid in high school when that game first released, but times have changed. Now, I'm an awkward man. But that aside, we're getting Metroid Prime 4 in 2025, barring any more delays. That is the one true fact as of right now. And if anybody wants a taste of what that's going to be like, the ever-impressive remaster, though it's kind of more like a remake in many cases, is available right now on the Switch. It's great! Amazing even! Looking back at the GameCube version, it's literally one of the greatest games ever made. But I'm not here to talk about Prime 1. I just want to reflect a bit on something else. Not the first game, not the last one, but instead the strange middle child of the family that I very well might enjoy more than the first title, Metroid Prime 2 Echoes. For as much as this series is talked about, I feel as though not many people ever really add Echoes into the conversation. It's usually that game that was bundled with Metroid Prime Trilogy that you played and then it just kind of happened. And you know, there are valid criticisms about the game that people will immediately bring up that they dislike about the game. There's an ammunition system implemented into your regular beams. There's a light and dark world that can kind of feel like padding at times. The dark world in particular can be too hard to navigate because you're constantly dying. I've heard a lot. And you know what? Valid complaints. It's certainly not the first game that I would tell anybody to introduce themselves to the series with. But when it comes down to it, I think this might be the quintessential Metroid experience in 3D. Metroid Prime 2 Echoes starts off with Samus seeking the Galactic Federation Marine Trooper Squad sent over to the planet Aether after losing contact. She quickly finds out why contact was lost here, as the atmosphere of the planet itself left her gunship immobilized. Well, she isn't just gonna sit around and wait for repairs, we got a group of dudes that need rescuing. So, I'm not the kind of person that explores too deeply into anything horror related, you know? The intro to Prime 1 was pretty freaky as it was, just a bunch of corpses of space pirates in a ruined space frigate, with giant grotesque creatures in every room. And I was glad to know on the get-go that I was going to meet up with actual, real people this time. Or at least, you know, that's how the plot was lining up to be. Being a kid that didn't really expect much from a Metroid plot, I was like, everything's fine. We're gonna go meet up with the boys, shoot some bad guys, have some drinks, maybe sing some merry songs, and... Oh, so that's how it's gonna be, huh? I see I've stumbled into the hangout spot. Well, you know what they say, if it looks bleak in Metroid, it is probably a whole lot worse. The Marines aren't just all dead, they're also occasionally possessed zombies. At this point in my life, I never bothered with anything like Resident Evil, or as I said, any horror adjacent title with first person shooting, the undead, etc. The thing that gets me here, more than the intro to Metroid Prime 1, is that these are actual people, not just monsters or space pirates. I guess it felt a little more personal, like I thought I was gonna meet up with some friends, but they're literally all dead. And to make this go from worse to worser is the encounter with a mysterious lookalike, someone Samus has never seen before. This Phazon-consuming doppelganger is aptly named Dark Samus, marking the first appearance of this character. Well, sort of. If you play to the end of the original Metroid Prime, one very important scene with the final boss, who is Metroid Prime, extends a tendril and literally rips the Phazon suit right out of Samus. That was kinda weird. If you play the game to 100% completion, you're given a little extra scene in which from this pool of Phazon, a wicked hand with an eye on it emerges. I was fearfully curious what this was going to mean for the future of the series, and here we have the answer. For those who happen to not know, Dark Samus is Metroid Prime, just in possession of a Phazon suit exoskeleton, having warped it with its energy. And after following it into this weird portal, we are not only introduced to the classic dark version of the hero trope, We also witness the hostile inhabitants of this world, these inky little guys called the Ing. After Samus realizes that the atmosphere of this world is literally cooking her, she shoots the ceiling and makes a break for it. You can just barely see that some of these Ing were crawling on her for a second or two. She clearly escapes, but then the game tries to tell you that, oh no, these guys that barely tickled you stole all your upgrades. Time to start from square one again. It's actually not as bad in this game. As opposed to Metroid Prime 1, where you feel literally naked at this point, at least you keep some of the essentials like your charge beam, your various suit, and the morph ball. You also get your missiles back like, what, 10 minutes later? It's a bit kinder than it was before. Not long after that encounter, you emerge to the temple grounds, and thus your adventure begins proper. It isn't long until you encounter the landing site for the Galactic Federation. Samus learns what happens upon their arrival, that they are pursuing the space pirates into planet Aether. Unfortunately, it wasn't long until these creatures we met earlier found the Marines and easily overwhelmed them. It's kinda messed up, man, especially considering that they possess a lot of them after. We actually see a moment of compassion from Samus as she closes the eyes of the final trooper standing, being the captain who sent the last signal from their base. Very much an "I'll take it from here, soldier" kind of gesture. More so than Metroid Prime 1, there's a stronger emphasis on the story surrounding the planet. In that game, you're given a brief intro in the beginning of your mission, one to stop the space pirate activity while getting wrapped up in the conflict of the Great Poison that eradicated the Chozo of Talon 4. It didn't explain much, but it didn't really need to. Metroid Prime 2 goes for more of a narrative, one that's expanded and explained to you upon meeting Umos. He is a sentinel of the Luminoth, inhabitants of Aether, and friends of the Chozo. They're basically big ol' friendly moth people. We are told that a massive cosmic object once collided with Aether, splitting the foundation of the world in two, the second being a dark echo of the world of light that we inhabit now. He's the one that tells you that the ugly creatures that formed from it, stole Samus's gear, and killed the Federation Marines are known as the Ing. The Luminoth have been at war with these creatures for a very long time, and the situation became so dire that the remaining tribe was put into stasis and protected so that they wouldn't go extinct. The plot essentially becomes a situation of both worlds share energy. If one possesses all the energy, then the other will perish. Umos awaited one who would bring them salvation, and of course, that happens to be Samus. Given that the Ing could look to ravage worlds beyond this one if left unchecked, she takes the job to purge this evil. He asks her if he can destroy an entire dark half of the world, and Samus is like, "Have you seen my resume?" I would say that it's up to this point that this still feels a lot like the first Metroid Prime, but with more of a narrative, and that's perfectly fine, right? It's when you get into the details that make this game stand out that people will get divisive with it, mostly the environment of Dark Aether itself. I'll just say it like this game's mean. I don't care what anyone says, Dark Aether is the true villain of this game. The moment you step into it from a gone waste, you're given the message that the environment of this world will cook you, literally cook you alive. While inside of the little bubbles of light, your health will gradually recover, but when exposed to the raw atmosphere, you are losing health at a rate which just barely crosses the threshold of, oh, I'm gonna die if I just stand around. The enemies are more aggressive, the environment is oppressive, it is basically a real bad time to just stand around aimlessly. There's times where you'll feel like you are constantly on the move, not just mechanically, but because everything just feels weird. It just does the whole Zelda thing, you know? In the context of Metroid, it is the Dark World from A Link to the Past, it is the Twilight Realm, the Silent Realm from Skyward Sword, the 7-year future of Adult Link and Ocarina of Time, Lorule and Link Between Worlds, and most recently, the Depths from Tears of the Kingdom. You ever notice how much Zelda just loves to give you an alternate world of the same locations, except now everything is just scarier and mean? But in most cases, it's a clever way to expand the game's world while we're using a lot of the same assets. And it's not like it's a bad thing, some of those Zelda titles are among the most iconic in the series. But does it work well in the context of a Metroid game, one that is a first-person shooter no less? Part of that comes down to your opinion of how the most integral part of the game is handled. That is the introduction of the lights and dark beams. In most Metroid games, a beam upgrade opens up a whole new layer of gameplay. Your power increases, you can take on stronger enemies or destroy smaller ones with fewer hits. Most notably, it increases your range of exploration, whether you're passing a beam through a wall or melting a layer of ice. These upgrades are also few and far between. In Metroid Prime 2 Echoes, your first beam upgrade happens within the first area, just before the second hour or so of the game. The dark beam is self-explanatory. You shoot dark clumps of energy at the enemy. It fires slowly and can be powerful for combat, but you'll use it a lot more for puzzle solving early on. If you look at the arm cannon real closely, it is just a reskinned ice beam from Metroid Prime. It even freezes Metroids the same way the ice beam would. They had to add that in somehow. But then get this, not even 20 minutes later you get its counterpart, the light beam. And as you might expect, this is ideal for dealing with enemies like the Ing of Dark Aether, literally burning them alive with pure light energy. The arm cannon spreads open like the wave beam, but functions almost exactly like the plasma beam. I also love how when you're charging this beam, there is a mini disco party in Samus's arm. This game gives a huge focus on switching between both beams for combat, puzzle solving, and several other contraptions and situations that the game will put you in. You will use these in tandem to activate portals, energize safety beacons to keep you from dying faster on Dark Aether, hitting crystals with the polar opposite energy, and more. But the devs didn't want you to just mindlessly blast everything with the light beam, you know? Or rather, they were told not to. Therein lies the other controversial aspect of this game, the ammunition system. If you're a fan of Metroid, you'll know that the only items that have ever had an ammo system tied to it are the missiles and the power bombs. Well, what if we tie that to your main beam power weapons, Yeah? You don't sound excited. A lot of people weren't. You only start with just 50 maximum of each ammo capacity available at all times, but you can increase them by increments of 50 more by finding expansions. So how do you replenish this, you might ask? Well, by defeating enemies or destroying containers with the dark beam, you will get ammo for the light beam, and vice versa. You tend to get a lot more ammo than you would health or missiles. They will also be automatically picked up if you're within range, unlike everything else that's on the field. This is really weird for a Metroid game, but it's super interesting to me. And I know I'm probably in the small camp that actually enjoys this. Not even some of the developers who worked on Prime 2 are that keen on this system. Admittingly, it's rather unfriendly, and giving Samus scarcity in basic beam weapons felt uncharacteristically limiting. Engineering the ammo replenishment system was more like putting bandages over bandages. Your basic power beam is unlimited, and somehow becomes preferable a lot of the time because you'll be running out of ammo if you're not carefully managing it. You are taking a core function which should also be used for puzzle and combat and making it needlessly more stressful given that you're traversing a world that is actively draining your health. If you do run out, you can fully charge your beam for a single miniature shot. So you're never without a way to replenish it, but that's just sort of another quick fix solution. It does feel counterintuitive from a design standpoint, and it makes me wonder if they would ever adjust this in any way if a remaster were to come out. Honestly, I kinda hope it stays mostly the same. I think people are starting to know me as one of those sickos who likes the sequel to classic games that are obviously harder and expect more of you from the previous title. The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, Banjo-Tooie, Pikmin 2, Metroid Prime 2 Echoes. Each of these games adds new layers of difficulty, the kind that expects you to be familiar with the previous game as you're given various new concepts, difficulty spikes, much more areas to explore, and/or time limits. These are applied in certain ways that sort of force the games to be harder on the players. Most of these were also made relatively quickly from the previous game compared to others in the series, with Prime 2 being developed in only 20 months. Because of time constraints, balancing is not always fully realized and they end up being difficult to the player in different ways. But when I look back at them, I think I like all of these games more so than their predecessors. For what it's worth, Metroid Prime 2 gives you that definitive sense of isolation and impending dread that other titles in the series haven't all quite accomplished. Metroid Prime 1 invoked that feeling very well in the first area, but somewhat lost that level of tension in newer areas. With Metroid Prime 3, while I did enjoy seeing Samus communicate with fellow hunters in the Federation, it certainly didn't feel like she was stranded or as helpless anymore. As controversial as Dark Aether might be, it's one of the best representations of unsettling fear in the entire Metroid series. It is bleak, the monsters are warped and shadowy creatures, there's putrid protrusions of wildlife that looks nothing like what's in the light world, there's grotesque pulsing tentacle things? What are these? And this is all on top of the slowed down, warped version of the music that plays in Light Aether. If there is ever going to be a remastered version of this game, this place, Dark Aether of all places, has the potential to be graphically enhanced the most. Everything just kinda got washed over purple with extra tentacle-like assets, but they can do so much more. Really enhance and sell the uninhabitable environment of Dark Aether. Make the ing look oily, shiny, and slick, especially when they turn into these puddles on the grounds and walls, just as the devs imagined them to be. This sucker right here, when this warped version of an ink-possessed Metroid just casually strode up into this exact area, looking at me with its freaky eyes, I just wanted to turn my game off. Just the ugliest looking thing I've ever looked at, which means the team was very successful in their creature design. It's just one more thing on this huge list of opportunities to realize this world to its full potential and really make these oppressive areas be the highlight of a remastered version. Echoes has some of the most memorable areas of the series. Have you seen Sanctuary Fortress? The theming is very Tron-like, with these wonderful colors in both the dark and light worlds. We're usually exploring caverns, ruins, space pirate bases, but never anything that looks truly futuristic by Metroid standards. One of my favorite aspects is the extremely deep reds that you see here, unlike anything that you see in other dark worlds. It's such a subtle thing, but artistically it is one of the most stunning and creative worlds I've ever seen in Metroid. This place had so many interesting ideas, from bosses you fight only using the Morph Ball to Resbit! You ever heard of my good friend Resbit? If you allow this enemy to fully charge and attack you with no obstructions between you both, it will infect Samus's suit with a virus. The screen will start glitching out with static and freeze frames, and you need to hit a button combination to reboot your suit. This is one of the coolest effects in the Prime series, also because of how contextual it is. Samus herself isn't infected, but just like any blue screen, you sometimes just have to reset the whole computer. There's just so many cool concepts and ideas to see here, but I feel like a lot of people probably got turned away within the first couple of hours or so. The Agon Waste isn't too visually interesting, and it is the most stressful because you're taking the most damage here in the Dark World. It's very aggressive and it can be pretty punishing, which I guess is kind of the point though. I don't really mind difficulty increases like this, and trust me, there are some difficulty spikes in this game, especially if you're playing the original GameCube version like I am here. The Japanese release of this title was made easier, partially because that the audience overseas just wasn't really that used to first-person shooters as much as Western gamers were. The Agon Waste is still pretty punishing though, so I wonder just how many people decided that this wasn't going to be their thing before even clearing the first real area. You also meet Dark Samus here for your first proper duel. Fights with Dark Samus are always fun. She tends to obliterate the battlefield during an encounter. Just constant destruction wherever she goes. She is so rude. Can't they just get along and kill space pirates while holding hands?
What?
Unlike the first Metroid Prime, which had you traveling from biome to biome until you found your next path forward, Echoes handles it differently. The game focuses on exploring one location and its dark counterpart at a time. It really helps you learn the lay of the land without needing to trek across 3 different locations just to get a new upgrade first and then travel all the way back. It's not until much later in the game that you'll be required to backtrack over locations that you visited before. I always felt like this helped to assist the pacing of the game, while also respecting my time as the player acclimating to it through exploration and observation. There's also quite a lot of scanning to be done, sometimes an over-reliance on it, especially in the Agon Waste. I know it's how we get a lot of the world building if we choose to read everything, but there's just so much to look at compared to Torva's Bog, for example. But that was how I found out all the fun pirate lore in their bases. It's kinda hilarious to read how the space pirates were having panic attacks because now there's 2 Samuses to deal with. Poor guys, they're kinda just the punching bags that get possessed a lot by the ing in this game. They also learn not to keep Metroids as pets. Do not feed the Metroids, they will get food poisoning from your disgusting rations, and do not attempt to take them for walks, no matter how cute the little tiny baby Metroids look. Aw, they look so easy to kill. It's not until you beat the first proper boss of the game, Amorbus, and get the dark suit that the game starts to ease up a bit. And wait, wow, hold on, how did this boss get greenlit? Nintendo, you didn't give Retro Studios any notes on this? Should we censor this? Are we gonna get demonetized? I don't know anymore. I'm just saying, all this thing needs is a chariot, and Atlas has got some competition. Don't look that up. Right, we're talking about the dark suit. You know, for the longest time, I gotta admit, I think this was probably the ugliest suit Samus ever had. I think it's mostly because of the coloration and the massive shoulders. But as time has gone on, you know, I've kind of warmed up to it. It is the look of Metroid Prime 2 Echoes after all. I do still prefer the light suit for how sleek and different it looks, but you get this at the very tail end of the game and you don't really get any time to appreciate it. In comparison, you spend the vast majority wearing the dark suits. Love it or hate it, it has really good visual identity and is, unlike most of her suits, a complete change from the Varia suit and not just a quick recolor. It's very alien and foreign, which fits the mood of the game given you're on such an exotic, hostile planet. The callbacks to other games, as Metroid tends to do, are still here. You have a cool remix of Lower Brinstar in the aquatic depths of Torvus Bog. It's very nice. And the screw attack makes its 3D Metroid debut as a crazy quintuple jump across large gaps, as a way to wall jump back and forth, and to shred Metroids in just one touch. Ah yes, broken as always, as it deserves to be. Does this girl just not get dizzy? Like, especially the morph ball, are Samus's eyes just spinning around and around while she's rolling? Or does she just kind of scan and feel her way around? Cause she's like a ball of energy, she's not pulling a Sonic here or anything. Huh. Is this the headache that the Space Pirates had when they were trying to replicate the morph ball and crunch some poor guy's body to death? I'm never gonna understand bird magic. Oh yeah, and this game also had multiplayer. That was one of the biggest drives to make a sequel, was to add a whole multiplayer section. But despite how much they worked on this and how much that this influenced some aspects of the main game, it was largely forgotten. I think I can count how many times I played multiplayer in Metroid Prime 2 on one hand. I honestly wonder if online multiplayer with Echoes would be a fun thing. I remember the death ball was overpowered and that was it. But yeah, I had this urge to talk about Metroid Prime 2 Echo since it's definitely not talked about enough. I don't have any clue who shares this opinion with me or if I'm just crazy for feeling this way, but there you have it. It's weird, it's different, it's on the GameCube, and I like all the above about it. Underneath all of the light and dark world flipping, the ammo, and the stressful insanity, there is the same solid structure and foundation of a great Metroid game. Except Ridley. Ridley's not even here. But you know what? Good! I swear, I was gonna lose my mind if I suddenly just saw Dark Ridley flying around after killing him for, what, the third time in the first Metroid Prime. Although you do have to kill him twice by the time Metroid Prime 3 rolls around. Man, why doesn't Samus just kill his parents instead? I don't know, are Mama and Papa really even still around? Maybe they're pleasant people. Well, it doesn't matter. See how Ridley likes it. Thank you all so much for watching. Have you ever played Metroid Prime 2 Echoes? Are you just waiting for that potential remaster, or do you think we'll just get it dropped on NSO for GameCube whenever that happens? Let me know down in the comments, and be sure to tune in for more from Good Vibes Gaming. May the light of Aether shine upon you. Till we meet again.